and I got a microphone, but you'll only hear me. So, so I'm Dr. Jake Giese, physical therapist, certified personal trainer. You guys already know that. Um, I wasn't sure necessarily what Claudette wanted me to talk about. She said she wanted me to talk about hiking training assessments. So today we're going to talk about like how do you know whether you're prepared for a certain hike or not, um, and what sorts of different assessments you can use in order to determine whether you can do it. So first off, there's a lot of different components when it comes to hiking. People think of like just putting on a pack and going. So that would be like your endurance, but there's the strength portion, there's, balance portion, right? Like different trails are going to have different terrain. So you have to know how to manage it. So going into all those other conversations we had about like being prepared, um, really is a big deal. So you need to like go ahead of time, look up the elevation, look at a topographical map possibly, and figure out what type of terrain there is. So um, today I'm going to kind of walk through the basics of figuring out like what assessments you should do based on that hike. So as far as like endurance and aerobic capacity, when I say that, I mean like your heart's ability to actually do the hike. There's a couple of different tests you can do to do this. The main one is like a graded treadmill test. If you have a treadmill in your gym or at home, it's a great way to do it. Basically, you can look it up and you can actually follow an actual test on this. And basically, what it's going to do is it's going to have you start at a certain walking speed with a certain slope, like an incline, and then it's going to slowly increase the speed in the incline to, um, and then you go as far as you possibly can with that test. So with it, all of this though, what you do is you record your heart rate at the beginning, your heart rate during, and your heart rate after. And then and you do that by using a watch, a heart rate monitor, or you can check your pulse through your hand or your neck. Careful with your neck. If you push too hard, you can occlude your cervical arteries. But um, using that, you can then determine how hard that specific intensity was. Other basic ways that I do it. So actually, I should back up a little bit. I do have an online business helping hikers, outdoor enthusiasts train for hikes and different adventures, but also like rehab injuries. That's my kind of bread and butter because I'm a physical therapist. Um, and then prep your gear. So that's kind of my three avenues: training, injury prevention, and injury rehab, and gear. And then I have a business kind of around that, whatever people are in. And I do life coaching and different wellness coaching through monthly calls with people, as well as giving you resources to my courses. I do have 2 courses out right now, online training courses. They are one's for flexibility, so like how to stretch all of the major muscle groups of your body. That one's called Stretch Buddies. And then the other one is Hike Strong. So how in 60 days, how to train from going to be an absolute beginner to being able to do some of those more intermediate advanced hikes. And it lays out pretty much everything that I'm talking about today, but in a lot more detail to follow along. So we talked about the treadmill graded test. The other one that I use is really basic. Anybody can do it anywhere. It's a step test, 2-minute step test. So all you need is a step. Ideally, they say the step should be like mid shin. So if you're like at a gym or something like that, try to like sometimes you can adjust the height, get it so it's mid shin for you. And then you take your heart rate again before you do it. You set a timer for 2 minutes and you see how many steps you can go up and down on that step. Then as soon as you're done, then you take your heart rate again. If you have a watch, it's great. You can turn it on and it will tell you your heart rate during the activity too. But you can get your heart rate after, and then you can see how hard you worked. And that'll give you a baseline. So you do that in the beginning of your training, then you would do it maybe halfway through, say 2-3 weeks, and then at the very end and see if you're making any progress. So that's just for your heart. Those are the main tests that you can do for your heart. There's other ones too. I mean, more backpacker specific. You can find a trail that's flat and level for the most part, and start a specific point. Do the exact same principles. Take your heart rate before, in the middle, and after, and you go and you do a certain trek, like a certain distance, and you see how you performed on that hike. So say you're planning for a 10-mile hike, you would maybe start with if you're an absolute beginner, maybe 2 or 3 mile hike. If you're kind of in the intermediate, you would go to 4 to 5 or etc. based on whatever. You're not doing 10 miles in the very beginning. So that's the key. You start slow and then you work your way up, and you use those assessments to guide you. So if you're not showing a lot of progress, then you need to look back and change something along the way, instead of just keep doing what you're doing. So, um, so that's for the endurance, the hiking specific, and the aerobic type assessments. Strength assessments. So, um, does anybody do any strength training for hiking right now?
A little bit.
Okay. What do you do specifically? Do you have any examples?
Mostly I start with 2 sets of dumbbells. I work my way up to 20, 25, 30 pound dumbbells.
Okay.
Arnold press, and I do bicep curls. And do about 2 sets of 15 reps of 85 pounds on the bench.
Okay. So bench and dumbbells and shoulders. Okay. Yeah, so I'll give you the basics for so strength training is one of the things that most hikers totally overlook, because and even trail runners and outdoor people, they think that I'm just going to run. That's what I'm doing. I'm doing this event. I need to run. So that's all they do. But in reality, if you actually look at what you need to do for that trek, um, you break it down into components. So this is why planning is important. If you find one that has a lot of elevation gain, then you're going to need a lot more power to get up those hills. And coming down, you need something called eccentric power. So being able to slow yourself down. So that's where strength would really come into play. If you have a lot of rocky terrain, like the Kettles, some of the Kettles are very rocky, or different areas, Rocky Mountains, very rocky, then you need something like more tailored towards balance. So you need to incorporate more of your balance into your training. Um, so those are different things to consider. I could go on. There's so many different avenues you could go on with this. Could talk for like 3 days straight about it, but just you need to break down your hike and figure out what you need to work on. But strength training, I need to talk about it because everybody usually doesn't do it. So strength training specifically for hiking, there's you don't need to know all you don't, like, most people go and they look online and they see people doing like 400-pound deadlifts and they just get intimidated, and that's not what it has to be. You can do it in the comfort of your own home. Like, I also treat people that are home health, and so we do everything in the house without any weights. We either use resistance bands or you just use your body, and you get people stronger. So we can do the same. So as far as like even just doing squats, right? Like, just when you're doing a squat, some people don't even know how to do a proper squat and they get intimidated, and so they don't do it. The first thing is just try. But when you're squatting down, there's no really right or wrong depth. You just go down to whatever you can feel comfortable. You don't have to go down to 90. You don't have to go ass to grass. Um, right? Like, you're going to have a coach somewhere along the line that is going to tell you something. Um, and, you know, do what's best for you. So the best thing I do for like doing squats is just stand up and sit down 10 times from a chair, and then you're doing that perfect squat pattern, because you're going to be doing that exact same position that you would do like if you're squatting, but you have that bench or chair behind you, so you don't have to worry about actually doing the right form. It's being annoying. um, anyway, so squats are really good. Lunges, the main key with a lunge is just when you're doing a lunge, back up so this thing doesn't freak out. when you're doing a lunge, a lot of people think about the knee and where it is over their toes. Like I said, don't worry about it too much. Like we were talking yesterday, knees over toes guy. He's the new guy, new phenomenon that everybody's coming out with. He used to have knee pain and he started doing things that doctors told him not to do. And now he's got better range of motion in knees than anybody. So he does a lot of backwards walking up hills, backwards walking on treadmills. And he does a lot of trying to get his knees over his toes. That's what most people were told not to do, but he does that and it works. And research is showing that it's actually beneficial. Um, so lunges, squats, deadlifts, you can start with deadlifts, dumbbells, kettlebells, whatever. You're basically just picking something up off the floor. And then the ones I like to do for arms are like a row. So you're just kind of picking something up. You can lean on a bench, lean on a chair, and you're just picking something up. Um, doesn't have to be anything fancy. There's a lot of other ones in there, but those are kind of the basics of where you can start. Um, and if you don't have any weight or don't have a weight or access to a gym or whatever, the best way to train for a hike is actually what I have. This is all written up right from my Hike Strong course. So basically have a schedule where I do strength training one day, aerobic another day, and then stair or step training another day, and then go into strength again. And then you kind of just repeat the cycle. So it's just one day of lifting weights, one day of working my heart, and one day of doing step or stair training. So um, the day where I work my heart, the aerobic, it's either biking, some sort of cycling, rowing, it can be anything, walking, um, anything that will get your heart going, elliptical. The stair and step training, that's where it gets a little bit more tailored to whatever your goals are. You can find a set of stairs in your house or at a garage, go to a parking garage, find the flight of stairs, and you can figure out okay, this hiking trip, I've got so much elevation. Figure out how much that flight of stairs is, and then you can do that many flight of stairs in order to accomplish that same amount of elevation. So that's your way to train kind of an elevation gain. And stairs are important better than like a stair master, like at a Planet Fitness or whatever. That's the one that has the steps on it. If you do something like that, you're only working how to get up. But most people have injury coming down. So that's why stairs are incorporated into my programs, because you're doing the up and the down. And so if you're doing any terrain, coming down, you'll notice people get achy knees. And most of the time that's because our quads, our thigh muscles here, are not strong enough to hold us up. So that's a concept I want to talk about, is called eccentric control. That's where most people get injured. So when I am lifting weights, I'm bicep curling like this, I got to lift the weight up, but then gravity is wanting to pull my arm down, but my muscles have to hold it up, right? My muscles are holding it up there. But if I slowly lower this down, gravity's pulling it down and the weight's pulling it down, and I'm kind of fighting it, but I'm letting it win. That's called eccentric control. It basically means I'm using my muscles to control motion and slow it down. So that's what we're using when we're doing descents on a hiking trail. And so that's really important for training, because when you do that, it takes more power to do that. It takes more energy, more power. And so people get really exhausted. So the way to incorporate that in your training is do things slow. So if you're doing your squats, like we said, standing up, sitting down, you don't just sit down really fast. You sit down really slow, as slow as you possibly can, because then you're actually going to work your quads a little bit more. And then when you do that, that may give you a little bit more burn and fatigue, and you'll feel it in your muscles more, and you know it's working too. Okay, any questions so far? I don't know how deep I should go into this. I got a lot, but Yeah, go ahead.
So
Fire away.
when it comes to strength training, should you and hiking, should you focus more on like leg exercises, like leg presses, calf extensions? Because well, with hiking, you use your legs obviously a lot
Hmm.
more than on, right?
Yeah. So yeah, the theory is yes. I mean, you do need off periods with anything. So the main concepts of strength training is called the overload principle. So basically, your body is used to, and we were talking about this the other day, like even with stretching, your body's used to being in whatever position it usually is. If you sit at a desk job, you're used to sitting in this flexed hip position here. And so all this is overactive and everything else on the other side of your body is underactive. um, so in order to get stronger at something, you just have to slowly overload it. So like in the beginning, you might feel that a 5 pound pack is heavy, but then as you train along, you may be able to get up to a 30 pound pack just because your body is going to over time adapt to whatever it's thrown at it. So when you do strength training, you want to slowly overload. That's the whole concept. You're adding weight over time so that your body adapts. That's how it gets bigger. Um, and the other misconception is more is not better and pain is no gain. Those two things have been ingrained into people's minds. That is not true because you get stronger while you sleep. You don't get stronger necessarily while you lift. You need to lift to get stronger because of that overload principle. But people get stronger in the recovery. So like eating their protein, getting their sleep, and that's why like a sleep system when you're camping like that is so important because you need to be able to recover for the next day. Yeah. Um, I don't know if I really answered your question, but yeah, you need to go up and down with your strength training. So like one day you go heavy, one day you'd go low, one lighter, and then you do kind of like a roller coaster effect. Any other questions with that? No.
Oh, that's walking up on the stairs. That straight straight in the knee go down.
So walking up will strengthen, but that's strengthening your quads and kind of your glutes. But then going down, you're working the same muscle groups, but more because you're doing that slow, controlled motion where you have to, your body has to give out more power in order to do it.
So how about biking exercise legs in a different way?
Hmm. Yep. So that's why, like, we incorporate aerobic training or doing some other activity because you don't want to just do hiking. Because if you just do hiking, you're going to get tight in certain muscles. Like, oftentimes with hikers, they're really tight in the hips, right here in the front. And that's why, when you're walking, you've got the hip belt on. So oftentimes it's limiting you. And then you're going up a hill. So you're kind of always in this motion. It's almost like you're sitting all the time. You're never getting your hip behind you. So, like I was telling Kevin yesterday, is like we always need to do the opposite of what we do all the time. So if we're doing sitting all the time or going up hikes, we need to bring this hip behind us. So if we want to stretch out the front, we always go the opposite direction. So anything in the front of our body, like if I want to stretch out my abs, I go backward. If I want to stretch out the front of my hip, I go backwards, If I want to stretch out the back of my leg, I go forwards, right? So I'm always going the opposite direction of wherever that muscle is on my body. Does that make sense? Questions about that? No. So that'll give you like a little starting place when you're looking at like how do I stretch a certain muscle, and then you could just play around with it. Like if you're trying to stretch out your back and you're just kind of like, okay, the back's on the back side of my body, I gotta go forward, okay, and then I gotta go opposite to that. So if I want to stretch out this side, I'm going this way, and then you can kind of just like play around with your positioning to figure out where you need to stretch it. So yeah. Um, And then the other things that I was going to talk about, I don't even know, I think of sitting on it, is like heart rate. If you really want to get in the nitty gritty, you can like narrow all this stuff down into your heart rate and figure out like what your target zone should be. So most of the time, like for hiking, we want to be in zone 2 or zone 3. Like if you got a watch and you set your Garmin, on it, it'll oftentimes tell you what zone you're in based on your heart rate. And you want to be in like zone 2 or 3. That's going to be about like 50 to 60% of your heart rate, your max heart rate. There are calculations to do that. It's called the Carnivin method. Um, and I can walk you through that if you want. I wrote it down. But basically, you find the way you would do that is you have to find your absolute resting heart rate. So that's like right as you get up in the morning, you take, like you didn't even move yet. You're still laying in bed. You take your heart rate right then and there. That's your resting. Then you need to find your max heart rate. And there's a calculation for that. It's basically not 220 minus your age. Most people think 220 minus your age. That's not right. It's actually 207 minus 0.7 times your age. So you take your age times 0.7, and then you subtract that from 207. And that's your max heart rate, theoretically. Then as you get older, that number is less accurate. So it's just a target number. And then you can use those two numbers to find out like your reserve, and then you can figure out how hard of things are. If you have any questions with that, ask me, and I will definitely help you out with that. We'll do the calculations and figure out what you need to do. All right. Any other questions? I don't even know how long I've been talking. I'm good. Yeah, good comment. So when do you do static stretching versus other stretching? So research shows that in order to increase the length, or not necessarily increase the length, because your muscles are always going to be a certain length. This is our fibers. They're interlocked like this. They can only separate so much. They're never going to like actually fully detach, because then you'd have a problem. They would tear. Ow. So say they're overlapped, you can only pull them apart so much. So when you're increasing range of motion, you're actually just increasing like the pliability of that muscle, the flexibility of it. So in order to increase the flexibility, you're looking at 5 minutes of stretching whatever muscle you want to increase per week. So you want to try to get 5 minutes in per week. If that's 1 minute a day for 5 days, do that. Whatever it is, that's what the research shows. Oftentimes I tell people do like 2 minutes at a time. So meaning like today I'm going to stretch for 2 minutes. I would do it either twice or 2 times 1 minute, or I would do 4 times 30 seconds. Because some of these, like the neck, you're not going to sit here for a minute and stretch your neck, but you can sit there for a minute and stretch your hip. So you kind of just want 2 minutes of stretch time. And then as far as like static versus dynamic, so most people probably don't know what that means. So static stretching means that like you are getting in like a position and you're holding it like this, right? And so that's what I mean by those like 30-second holds, 1 minute holds. You're getting in that position, you're holding it. Oftentimes you don't want to do that before hike. You want to do that maybe after. Okay. What you do want to do is what we call a dynamic warm up. Dynamic warm up. It's a dynamic stretch. Dynamic means we're moving. So like in order to stretch out, I would do, I can do my squats as my stretch. My dynamic warm up. I can just do like side lunges. So I'm kind of opening up my hip. It's just I'm stretching while I'm moving. I'm kind of holding it and then I'm moving in each direction like that, right? And then you can do hip openers. You can do out or in to out. You can do out to in. You can do arm circles to get the thoracic cavity and the shoulders going. You can do rotations. Just basic stuff. Just get your body moving. That's called the dynamic warm up, and you can get as fancy as you want with that. But you just do that for maybe 10 minutes before you go, and that's your warm up for the hike. Good question. Any other questions on that?
How many do some sort of dynamic stretches sets? Maybe workout.
I'll set up like if you got space, like this campsite, for example, I'll do like 10 feet distance. So like I'll walk from like a certain tree to a certain tree. And then like as you're doing it, you would do your hip openers for 10 feet. Then you come back and then you do the other one for 10 feet. And then you'd go the other way and you do lunges for 10 feet to warm up. So I use the 10 feet in order to figure out uh, how much to do. Not necessarily reps, sets, none of that. You just go for distance and just do a certain amount. Because if you do 10 feet, most of the time, if you do like 5 or 6 of them, you're at close to like over 6 minutes to 10 minutes. Yeah. Yeah. And then like you can do like something to get your heart going, like a walk, or if you're in a gym, you can do a bike or treadmill or whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
Is there any value to stretching after a workout too?
This research is being debated. So they do show that like it can increase your range of motion and things like that. But I think recently they were fighting back and saying that like it didn't necessarily matter too much like afterward. More so when I would encourage this is if you have a certain problem with something. So like if you have a problem with your knee or your back, do it after you work out. And the whole reason why, and this is going into why you don't do like static stretching before you do a hike, is because like your muscles are cold. And if you're cold, you don't have a lot of blood flow in there. And then you're going to have like more likelihood of getting injured. So if you do it while you're like after you worked out and after you hiked, you're going to have more blood flow moving through there. And that blood is what's going to help it heal and give it circulation and lubrication, essentially. I like to say like your body, like your knees and stuff, like especially as we get older, people think like I have arthritis. And this is why I do this. Like this is why I'm working with outdoor enthusiasts because so many people have been told to go to the surgeon and they say, I have knee arthritis. You can never hike. You can't walk again. You can't hike again. You can't do anything. And people get so depressed. And I see them after the fact when they're 80 or 90 and they're like, bummed that their knees were killing them. But basically, think of your knee as like a gear. And in the gear here, we got to have lubrication. Like anytime you're dealing with metal, you got to have some sort of lubrication like your car. If you don't keep your oil regulated, you're going to have problems. You're going to have wear and tear. You're going to have issues. So the way you keep your oil regulated for your knees is actually movement. So healthy movement, getting full range of motion, because what it's doing is circulating the blood and circulating the synovial fluid around in your knee, which is your lubricant. So you just got to keep using your knees. If you don't, they get stiff, they get locked up, they get tight in a certain position, and your muscles will just get tight in that position. So we find this in really sedentary office people. They sit, their knees are always in 90 degrees, hips are always in 90 degrees. They're never actually doing that opposite motion, either full extension or hip extension, right? And then they just get stuck there and they can't get out of it because your body adapts to that. So, good question. Any other ones? Hiking training, rehab, recovery. Trying to think. Heart rate stuff. What else can we talk about? Yeah. But otherwise, yeah, I do a lot of wellness things too. Breathing, stress management, life coaching, how to be efficient with things. I'm like a meal prepper. I do all that stuff. So that's also what all my coaching involves. So like with my coaching, that's my primary thing that I do right now. Essentially, you get all the courses that I have created. So the flexibility one, the hiking one. You get a customized workout program, customized nutrition. If you have any injury, customized stretching rehab program. And then I also have like a library that I've created over the last 3 years where it has like all the education, all the stretching, all that so you can access that at any time. So it's like you just you log in to my website and it has all that in there. And then there's also hiking stuff in there too, hiking checklists, prep guides, strength guides, how to train from being flat ground to going to mountainous terrain. I made guides for all that. How to select the right footwear, just all these different things. So that's all in there. And that's all included. Um, and then you'd get like a bi-weekly or every 2 weeks you get a call with me, and 24/7 accountability too. Like if you had any questions. So I like to treat it like people. Um, if you go to see a personal trainer, oftentimes like they have no education in rehabbing injury. Like if you have an injury, they don't know what they're doing. They're just kind of like finding what they found online and figuring it out. And then for PTs, we can only see you until your insurance is up. And oftentimes, if you're a hiker or something, they won't let us work with you because we're not doing something where like it needs to be like for their daily life, not for their recreation. As soon as it's recreation, they're like, that's it. You're not working with me anymore. So I like to try to find the middle ground and help people in those little nicks and crannies where they're kind of in between all that. So yeah. Okay. Other questions? Tell us.
That's
Yeah. Good topic. Yeah. So a big debate recently. If you're on any forum, they're talking about going to trail running shoes and specifically wide toe box shoes. I'm not wearing mine right now because it was rained on, but the other day. But basically, there's specific brands. Ultra is the main one, and they have wide toe box shoes that give your feet a little bit more room. The whole reason why you have ultras on. Yeah. So he's got the ultras on. They got a wide toe box on them. What that means is that your feet can be split apart like that. That's going to help you with multiple things. People oftentimes get bunions because bunions is where like if you your big toe should be like out in front, but sometimes that big toe kind of like curves out and then in like that. And even sometimes people get like overlapping toes or hammer toes where they're kind of like scrunched up. Um, that's because we're wearing too narrow shoes on a daily basis. So, like you specifically like women, the heels and like the narrow shoes, it's just crunching your feet together, and it creates a lot of feet problems that we see later in life as a PT. So, for hiking specifically, if you wear those wide toe box shoes, it gives your feet the ability to splay out, which it should. Your feet should be able to do that because most of your balance actually is coming from your muscles in your bottom of your foot. You don't need the arch support to do it. Think about it, all these people that used to get around without footwear, or they're wearing bare minimal sandals. You go to a third world country, they're not wearing very high supportive shoes. They're wearing very minimalistic footwear, but they do fine. They don't complain about footwear problems. And that's because their muscles have, once again, adapted over time. That load, if you give it a certain load, it'll create its own arch. So, the debate of do you need actual hiking boots versus trail runners is showing that if you strengthen your feet, you don't need the hiking boot because actually that fabric is not really doing much for you. It's giving you a little support, but if you actually rolled on a rock, is it going to save you? No, you're still going to sprain your ankle. So the whole concept is you strengthen your foot and ankle so that you don't have to wear the big clunky boots that give you the hot spots and the blisters and all that stuff. So if you use a trail runner with wider toe box that gives you more room, you're less likely to get any blisters. If you get blisters, you're oftentimes going to get them on the heels of those shoes because of your socks. So good topic. Yeah, there's a lot there. But yeah, I recommend trail runners personally. They got good tread. Oftentimes you don't necessarily need like the Gore-Tex, like the waterproofing, unless you're in like snow, cold, really wet environments, because you actually want that breathability, because that's what's preventing you from getting the blisters, because it's letting you wick all that moisture out of your socks and shoes. and then that will help you prevent blisters. But if you have all that thick material and Gore-Tex, it's actually Gore-Tex like that is like an oil kind of based sealant. That's going to help be less breathable and keep it all in your feet, and then you're going to have blister problems. Yeah. So that's why people are switching away from that right now. Yeah.
Like not waterproof. It's like the problem you described. I've had.
Yeah.
I specifically got white box. Still
Yeah.
non-waterproof. Oh well, take it wet.
Yeah, exactly. They get wet, dry them out. You want the breathability, so it'll dry out fast. That's the concept. Yeah.
Can you tell us again the sodium how
Sure.
retargeting?
Yeah.
I said it yesterday, but I didn't write it.
No, that's okay. I'm trying to do it off of memory, so I apologize if it's wrong. But if it's low intensity, your sodium intake should be 200 to 300 milligrams per hour. If you are going moderate intensity, which most hikes probably will be, you're looking at more than that, 300 to 500 milligrams of sodium per hour to replenish your electrolytes. Most electrolyte drinks and stuff like that will have that already built into it. And then as far as the carbs go, this is very variable based on you, your activity level, your body size, and all that, and how hard that activity is for you. But in general, it's about like 40 to 60 carbs per hour is what you should be intaking for your nutrient intake. Yeah. And then smaller amounts of fats would be so with this is another topic that we could go into, but there's all these different energy systems as far as like your body. Your body has oxidative, which means that it's just like this is what you can do. You can do an activity for like 5 minutes up to 2 hours. So like your marathoners, ultra marathoners, even your 5K, it's using an oxidative type system. Then you have glycolytic. This is like using just like your regular body's ATP. This one is only good for less than that. So like 2 to 3. Yeah, we'll say 1 to 3 minutes. So this is a little bit more high intensity. So that other one was really slow, but long distances. Then you get into like the glycolytic, which is more high intensity, but you can only do it for 2 to 3 minutes. And then you have the creatine phosphate channel. That one is only good for bursts of like up to 90 seconds. So when you're sprinting, you're using creatine phosphate. When you're doing like say we're going up a mountain peak, like for our specific example, and we're really digging in, then we're using more of our glycolytic. We can also use creatine phosphate in that too. And that's why you get that burn, that lactic acid burn, because you're in that type of fuel source, because you can only do that for certain amounts. And then if you're doing like the long distance stuff, like more your 10 miles, then you're using oxidative. That means that I'm bringing in oxygen. So my primary energy source is coming through my oxygen. So I know that's a lot, but based on like what different category you are in that then determines what fuel source you need. So if you're like doing really high intensity stuff or like quick bursts, you need more carbs, like quick sugars, like your gummies and like gel tap, like the little yeah, like little carbs, those sugar carbs that you see marathoners do and stuff. That's because it's quick energy and that'll help you restore that. But if you're doing like long distance or working on your 10 miles energy source, then you need more fats because they're slow burners. So that's why like you can tailor your nutrition based on whatever hike you're doing. If you're doing a shorter fast one, you need more carbs. If you're doing something that's more like long distance, you're going to need a combination of carbs and fats based on that specific thing. Yeah. Questions of that? It is a lot. I'm pulling all of it out. Yeah. Okay.
Like a website that you want to.
Oh yeah. So flexforwardpt.com. It should be in like the Facebook group. I think there's a couple posts. Try not to be spammy, but I'm trying to like give out good content for everybody. So I know Claudette asked me to do some posting in there. I'm gonna try to keep it to a minimum because like, I don't want to be promotional and whatever. But otherwise, I have my own Facebook group page too, hiking and so hiking and then the and symbol, backpacking, and then colon, and it's training, injury prevention, and gear. That's my own Facebook group, and I post all my content in there. So you'll get like a lot of stuff for free if you just join that group. Yeah. Oh yes, yeah. So in yeah, at the social in October, I'll be doing a social talk there too. I can't make it in person, so it'll be online. Yeah, but yeah, I've got Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. So Instagram and TikTok are my name. So Dr. Jake, and then my last name Giese, Giese. And then I'm on YouTube too. That's actually through the business. I haven't changed it yet, but Flex Forward PT. It's all one word. That's on YouTube. You can find all my content. I have like 60 videos. I do a lot of back pain stuff on there. I'm a back pain and neck pain specialist too, so I like kind of switch between the two, whatever I'm feeling for the week, like back or neck pain stuff, and then training and gear and other things. Yeah, I think that's everything. Yeah, yeah, no problem. Thank you guys. Thanks for having me.